Democrats are hoping that disaffected Republicans, suburban women and Black and Latino voters will help them clinch Pennsylvania's 20 electoral votes and avoid a sequel to Donald Trump's unexpected victory there in 2016. But the initial trends portray a different picture. Pennsylvania epitomizes the divisions, loyalties and shifting political currents of the 2020 presidential race. The mostly white battleground state where 4 years ago President Donald Trump narrowly became the first Republican to win a presidential contest since 1988 is once again balanced between staunch Republican loyalty in its rural center and a resurgent Democratic Party in its urban and suburban areas. 69% of the estimated vote total has been reported. And as of now, the figures show that Trump is leading with 56.5% of votes and Joe Biden with an approximately 42%. Wisconsin, which has 10 electoral votes to give, there is a narrow Biden lead on the strength of heavily Democratic ballots, with the window closing for Trump. Trump has 49.1% of the vote share, while Biden is leading with 49.4% of the votes. In 2016, Donald Trump became the first Republican presidential candidate to win Wisconsin since 1984. He narrowly defeated Hillary Clinton by roughly 23,000 votes. Now it is among the election's swing states, and polls have suggested that entering Election Day, Wisconsin has been tilting considerably in Biden's favor. In Georgia, again, Trump is leading with 50.5% of votes, while Joe Biden is behind with 48.3% of the votes. On the other hand, in North Carolina, with 94% of the votes counted, Trump is leading with 50.1% of votes, while Biden is falling behind with 48.7% of the votes. VOA reporter Isha Sarai joins us live for more on this. Thanks for being with us. Now, you are in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, a state on which Trump is banking with the lead. What is the latest, and how will it add or alter Trump's or Biden's chances?
Absolutely. As you said, it's a key state. And as you mentioned earlier, less than 3/4 of the vote in Pennsylvania have been counted. So not only is Pennsylvania a key state in that it's likely that whichever candidate wins this state will carry the election, but also it may be one of the longest waits in the country to see all votes tallied. Election officials last week said they may not have full results from this state until Friday. So it really could take that long to determine who's the winner.
Right. Now, Trump and Biden both have taken poll positions. Trump saying freeze any more counting and it'll go to the Supreme Court, and he has won, and Biden wanting all votes to be counted. Now, which way is this election result headed, and how long could it take for the declaration of these results?
Absolutely. I think there has been a little bit of confusion. In Trump's speech last night, he kind of indicated that he wouldn't want any more votes to be cast. All voting has been completed in the United States, and any ballots that have not been mailed by Election Day yesterday will not be counted. So the question is, as you said, whether all votes will be counted. And I think that there's not a large question among election officials that there is a responsibility to count every vote that has been cast. How this election, which candidate the election will turn in favor of, is really yet to be seen. And as we discussed earlier, some election officials have said that not all votes could be counted until as late as Friday. So it truly depends the pace at which certain key swing states, such as Pennsylvania, can tally all of their mail-in, absentee, and votes that were cast yesterday.
Right, Isha, there are people out on the streets in D.C. protesting against Trump. Also in Portland, there's uncertainty and anxiety amongst people. What are you collecting from the feeling on the ground?
Yes, it's actually not that uncommon for the United States to not know the results of its election the morning after Election Day. But unfortunately, in recent memory, that's not as common. So I think that there is a lot of anxiety about what kind of election fraud could take place. President Trump has used the word fraud without specifying exactly what he thinks is happening with the mail-in vote system, especially in a speech last night. And people on the other side are concerned that, there are many Supreme Court cases happening about which votes should be counted, which votes are illegitimate. And I think that opponents of President Trump are concerned that their votes may not be counted. So the city and cities across the country are preparing for unrest. But it's also worth noting that there have been a lot of protests, particularly around Black Lives Matter, throughout the summer. So much of that energy is being carried into the protests that we might see in the coming week.
Right, Isha, stay with us. I'm going to go across to our correspondent, Sarah Walton, who continues to bring us all the latest developments from Florida. Listen.
Donald Trump eventually sort of eked ahead. It was eventually called with 51.3% of the vote for Donald Trump, 47.8% for Joe Biden. And actually that's Donald Trump extending his lead in Florida compared to the 2016 election. Really crucial announcement that here in Florida, because had Joe Biden won here, it would have been game over for Donald Trump. There was pretty much no way he would have been able to gain the 270 electoral votes he would need to make it back to the White House for another 4 years. With a loss for Joe Biden here, I mean, it's not essentially over for him. There is still the potential that he could win thanks to the results in other swing states. But what we are seeing is with other places such as Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, they are taking far longer to count their ballots, particularly mail-in ballots that have come in. And so we are seeing this dragging out of the process, potentially onto Wednesday, later in Wednesday, maybe even later in the week, where we're going to get an idea of who it is that's won.
Now, back to you, Isha. This election has been record-breaking on a number of fronts in terms of the number of mail-in ballots that were cast, voter turnout, and there are some big challenges facing the U.S. at the moment. Take us through some of the just the divisive natures of both of these candidates and their campaigns.
Absolutely. So I was speaking with voters in Philadelphia, in various neighborhoods of Philadelphia, and also Bucks County further north, where President Trump had a rally over the weekend, to kind of try to get a diverse cross-section of what the state looks like. I think that obviously the pandemic is on the forefront of many people's minds, but the question is whether they are more concerned about healthcare and how the pandemic is going to be dealt with, or the economy. I've spoken with a lot of Trump voters who say that the economy is their number one concern, and that especially before the pandemic, the economy was faring pretty well in the United States. People who've noticed that their taxes may have gone down, or one voter told me yesterday she believes her 401k has increased. But the question on the other side is, when will the pandemic end? There are a lot of people who support Joe Biden who are looking for stronger measures, perhaps a mask mandate, stay-at-home orders to control the pandemic. But another big issue that has been very divisive is the Black Lives Matter protests that have happened over the summer. There are a lot of people supporting Joe Biden who are looking for increased political awareness to racial inequality. Trump has called protesters rioters and looters. There have been some clashes in protests, and a lot of his supporters are just looking for calm and hoping that these protests stop.
Right, Isha, stay with us while I just go to our next story. President Donald Trump vowed to ask the Supreme Court to weigh in on the United States' inconclusive presidential election. Now, the Associated Press has not yet declared a winner in the presidential race. Associated Press executive editor Sally Busby brings us more on this situation.
The race is very close. These two candidates are battling to win. Either of them obviously could still win, and we will just be following the results as they come in, and the AP will declare a winner once one of these two candidates has actually gained the needed 270 electoral college votes. So the president said that he would take the election to the Supreme Court. It's not clear at this point what actual legal challenges he and his campaign would plan to make. So obviously we'll be just waiting to see what legal steps President Trump actually takes. What he said today was that he was going to take it to the Supreme Court, but it's not entirely clear yet what he means by that.
Right now, Isha, back to you. As we heard Sally say, the AP is responsible for declaring the winner of this election. But states like Nevada, Georgia, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, where you are, and Michigan, could potentially take days to complete their counts. And as you already mentioned, there is levels of stress and anxiety in the country. Surely this is only going to increase the longer these results take.
I can't speak to the personal anxiety levels of a lot of electors, but I can't imagine that, the longer it takes for results to come in, the more questions are going to be asked about where the country is headed.
Right. And Isha, what are some of the big surprises that we've seen? As an example, we have heard that this election was somewhat of a referendum on Trump's presidency with regards to coronavirus, as an example, being such a predominant issue and factor in the run-up to this election. But states like Texas, where it was so badly affected by coronavirus, has voted for Trump. What are some of the surprising outcomes that we've seen so far?
Again, as I mentioned earlier, I think that a lot of Trump supporters who I have spoken to have said that their main concern is the economy. And so even if they've seen the destruction that the coronavirus has caused, they're more concerned about shutdowns, businesses that have had to close because they weren't able to operate. And that's really a driving factor of Trump voters, even in Texas, which, as you said, has been quite badly affected by the virus.
Isha, thank you very much for joining us, bringing us all the latest on these updates in the elections. Now, while all eyes are on the battle between red and blue states, the Democrats and the Republicans are also eyeing the upper chamber, the Senate. As of now, the Republicans have a 47-53 majority in the Senate, but this year's election has only 35 Senate seats up for grabs. Now, some are considered to be competitive, where seats can be flipped, and Republicans are defending 23 seats, while the Democrats are defending 12. If Joe Biden wins the presidency, then the Democrats need a net gain of 3 seats to win control of the Senate. But if Trump is re-elected, then the Democrats need 4 seats to attain a majority. Interestingly, the GOP lawmakers are distancing themselves from President Trump. Many have been seen urging voters to vote for the most capable senator who best represents their state and their point of view. The GOP senators, Mitt Romney of Utah and Lisa Murkowski of Alaska, as well as Susan Collins of Maine, have diverged policy ideas from Trump. A few Senate Republicans have decided to spend a lot more on a new wave of coronavirus relief aid, stalling out on a deal with the Democrats to approve a $2 trillion plan. The Senate is critically important in passing the important legislations and winning both the presidency and Congress, and would give either party a massive opportunity to set the agenda on everything from healthcare to taxes to environmental policy. Now, in the last 4 years, the Senate played a strategic role in handing over the baton to the Republicans for all crucial decisions. In July of 2018, Trump nominated Brett Kavanaugh for Associate Justice of the U.S. Supreme Court. Now, even after the accusations of sexual assault charges, Senate voted 50-48 to confirm his nomination. In March of 2019, the U.S. Attorney General William Barr concluded Special Counsel Robert Mueller's report about the investigation into Russian interference in the 2016 presidential election. Barr said that no conclusion was reached by the special counsel, noting that the Mueller report wrote, while this report does not conclude that the president committed a crime, it also does not exonerate him. After Trump was impeached in the House of Representatives in February of 2020, the Senate voted 52-48, finding Trump not guilty on charges of abuse of power, and voted 53-47, acquitting Trump on charges of obstruction of Congress. Now, in September of 2020, Trump nominated Amy Coney Barrett as the U.S. Supreme Court judge, this to fill in the vacancy left behind by the death of Ruth Bader Ginsburg. A week before the election day, the Senate voted to confirm Barrett's nomination. Now, due to the surge of mail-in voting this cycle, it could take a while to know exactly which party takes control of the Senate, but the battle does seem to be neck and neck. Now, U.S. President Donald Trump and Joe Biden are locked in a razor-thin race for Wisconsin as vote counting stretches into the pre-dawn hours. America's eyes have turned to the same Midwestern battlegrounds that decided the election 4 years ago. With nearly all votes counted in the state, Biden had a lead of less than 0.3 of a percentage point over Trump. Now, this margin is narrow enough to allow Trump to request a recount if it stands. Biden is ahead of Trump by fewer than 8,000 votes out of nearly 3.2 million votes cast. Now, there are still a few thousand other votes waiting to be counted, and Wisconsin, which has 10 electoral votes to give, is among the swing states that could well determine the course of the presidential election. Trump has 49.1% of the vote share, while Biden is leading with 49.4% of the votes. The outcome was close in 2016 too, where President Donald Trump won the state by just a percentage point that year. Trump became the first Republican presidential candidate to win Wisconsin since 1984. He narrowly defeated Hillary Clinton by roughly 23,000 votes. This cycle, former Vice President Joe Biden is attempting to flip it back. And polls have suggested that entering Election Day, Wisconsin has been tilting considerably in Biden's favor. Now, given how close the margins were in the 2012 election, several counties are seen as the prime battlegrounds between Biden and Trump. Now, among them is Kenosha County, the site of massive protests against police and racism after Jacob Blake was shot by a law enforcement officer earlier this year. In American democracy, concession speeches from the defeated political rivals have traditionally played a key role in the peaceful transfer of power. But this year, the presidential candidates may not concede on election night or soon after if the election results are close. Our next report tells you why.
For 36 days after the 2000 presidential election, in which the margin of victory came down to a few hundred votes in the key state of Florida, Democratic candidate Al Gore and Republican rival George W. Bush engaged in legal disputes over the ballot count. But after a conservative majority on the Supreme Court sided with the Bush campaign, Gore conceded the race and pledged to support the incoming President Bush.
And tonight, for the sake of our unity as a people and the strength of our democracy, I offer my concession.
On election night in 2016, Democrat Hillary Clinton struck a similar unifying tone in congratulating Republican Donald Trump on his upset presidential victory.
We must accept this result and then look to the future. Donald Trump is going to be our president. We owe him an open mind and the chance to lead.
Both Gore and Clinton lost in the official electoral college system designed to give rural states added representation despite winning the national popular vote. This year, Clinton advised Democratic candidate Joe Biden not to concede under any circumstances, as she expects the Trump campaign to contest mail-in or absentee ballots that surveys indicate are being cast by significantly more Democrats than Republicans. At the first presidential debate, Biden said he would accept the election outcome, but only after all the votes are counted. That could take some time.
And in terms of whether or not when the votes are counted, and they're all counted, that will be accepted. If I win, that will be accepted. If I lose, that'll be accepted.
Trump, who is trailing in presidential opinion polls, has repeatedly said he may not accept the election results if Biden is deemed the winner, citing unverified claims of massive mail-in voting fraud and abuse.
They found some with the name Trump, just happened to have the name Trump just the other day in a waste paper basket. They're being sent all over the place. They sent 2 in a Democrat area. They sent out 1,000 ballots. Everybody got 2 ballots. This is going to be a fraud like you've never seen.
Analysts worry that a refusal by the losing candidate to accept the results and call upon supporters to do the same could weaken public faith in democracy.
A prolonged dispute could be very damaging for confidence in our democracy and the legitimacy of the next president.
With partisan tensions so high this year, both sides also fear a bitterly contested election could spark political violence from right-wing extremists and radical leftists. Brian Patton, VOA News, Washington.